and the war with Hamas and Jewish events throughout the world. And every Motzei, Shabbat, and Sunday, I look to see whether there's something last minute. And there's something I came across, and I wanted to begin with this. It's not earth-shattering. It's not really the kind of thing that would have caused me to create this program, this class. But since we cover things throughout the world, this is something that for most of you will seem completely irrelevant, but it's relevant to me, and I think it should be relevant to us. Someone died who I think we should know about if we didn't know about him when he was alive. Kinky Friedman. Kinky Friedman was a country music singer. He once was on Saturday Night Live as the featured music guest of the episode back in the years when Saturday Night Live was funny. And he was a strange bird. He was a country music singer in Texas and was Texas, although he was born in Chicago, he was Texas through and through. He also was liberal, not woke, but a liberal Democrat. He even once ran for governor of Texas. He got 12.5% of the vote. But the thing that made him stand out to me and to a lot of my friends back in the 1970s, during the years of the Soviet Jewry movement and a lot of Jewish pride in the streets of Brooklyn, was that Kinky Friedman was extremely proud of being Jewish. He wasn't a Shomer Mitzvot, Torah observant, but in the country music world, he stood out as a 100% ethnic Jew. And he wrote songs that referred constantly to his being Jewish, among his many other songs, some of which were obscene and many of which were funny. But he wrote about Jewish topics. I'll mention one, and then the particular one I'd like to bring to your attention before we move on. He wrote one about, it's called "We Reserve the Right to Refuse Service to You." And first he goes to a military recruitment stand during the time of the Vietnam War, and he says, "I reserve the right to refuse service to you." Then he goes to a luncheon counter, and he tries to order food, and they look at him, and they say, "You're something like, you're basically a long-haired Jew, aren't you?" "Yeah, well, we reserve the right to refuse service to you." And then it's Yom Kippur, he goes to his Reform temple, and they look at him and they say, "You're not wearing a tie, and you don't have a ticket. We reserve the right to refuse services to you." And then all the people that got on him, when they respectively die and they go to heaven and they show up at the pearly gates, they're told, we reserve the right to refuse service to you. But here's the other song. It caused a lot of controversy for people who did not understand who he was and what he was. His group is called Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys. So already you could see that if you didn't know who Kinky Friedman was, you wouldn't necessarily get what he was up to. He wrote a homage to the victims of the Holocaust. And before we move on, I want to just play this for you. You probably never heard it in most of your cases. In it, he uses the images of country music because he's singing to a country music audience. And he uses images like smoke from camps arising, with the obvious, not as a joke. Some people thought he's being snarky, but if you listen to it with the understanding that it was his homage to the victims of the Holocaust, it takes on a different meaning. And as you'll hear him talk about it in an interview, it had a deep impact on Nelson Mandela when Mandela was in prison and trying to gain freedom and overcome apartheid. And later on, Willie Nelson, he doesn't need any introduction, became very friendly with Kinky Friedman, and to sort of publicize that song, he covered it. He sang his own Willie Nelson version of it. I'm not going to play both. I'll play the Kinky Friedman one, not the Willie Nelson. It's too long, but I'll give you a little taste of the Willie Nelson. Then we'll go right to work. Here we go.
We lost a little bit of Texas charm today with the passing of one of our state's most colorful characters.
Kinky Friedman, singer, author, and one-time candidate for Texas governor, died at his home in the Texas Hill Country this morning. Here's more about Kinky's life from KVU's Bob Buckaloo.
Richard Friedman was born in Chicago, but became a Texan when his father accepted a professorship at the University of Texas. When he was a UT student, his curly hair earned him the nickname Kinky. In his early career, he was known mainly as a singer-songwriter. Friedman, who was Jewish, was leader of the country rock band known as the Texas Jew Boys. In 2004, he entered politics with a run for Texas governor against incumbent Rick Perry. Friedman's campaign commercials were the stuff of legend.
Look, I'm 61 years old, too young for Medicare and too old for women to care. But I care about what's happened to Texas. For the first time,
Friedman lost the election in 2006. He placed fourth, but politics were frequently on his mind. He ran twice for Texas Ag Commissioner and lost both times, but remained a keen observer of politicians.
I think the politicians are pretty uninspiring, and I'm trying to think of any elected official that inspires me. And the truth is, we should limit all these guys to 2 terms, 1 in office and 1 in prison.
Behind his wisecracking persona was a talented author. Friedman wrote a number of popular novels and, for a time, had a regular column in Texas Monthly magazine. He was known as a thoughtful and caring man. Among his passions was providing a home for abandoned and injured animals at the Utopia Animal Ranch in the Texas Hill Country. Larger than life, one of a kind, and a true Texas legend, Kinky Friedman died at his home in Medina, Texas today. He was 79 years old. Bob Buckaloo, KVU News.
All right, I'm going to try to keep my story so it won't be stultifyingly dull.
too late.
It's too late, but around, I don't know when it was, but I think the mid-'80s, maybe late '80s, I toured South Africa with the book God Bless John Wayne. It's kind of a book tour and a music tour. Did some concerts. So during that time, I did a TV show, a national TV show with a guy named Dolly Tombo. Dolly is the son of Oliver Tambo, who is Nelson Mandela's mentor. Oliver died when Mandela was in prison, as most of the people he knew died. So during this TV show, there's another guy on the show named Tokyo Sexwale, which is spelled sex whale. And Tokyo was widely known as Mandela's right-hand man. He was also in prison on Robben Island with Mandela in the next cell for 17 years. Now Mandela was in prison for 1/3 of his long life. So Tokyo, when the TV show took a break, he said, look, during the next break, Kinky, in the show, I want you to come over here, I want to tell you something. So I go over there and Tokyo says, you know, Kinky, Mandela is a big fan of yours. And I said, you're kidding, man. What is it? What's the books? What book is it? And he says, not the books at all. It's the music. And it really floored me. He said that we couldn't get the music of the day, you know, so it was smuggled into us on tape cassettes. And the person that I suspect, this is Tokyo talking, the one I suspect smuggled it into Mandela was Helen Suzman, a woman I have met. Helen was the only woman in the South African parliament during the whole period of apartheid. She was also the only Jew in the parliament during that period. And she was also the only member of the government who ever visited Mandela in prison. And it's my suspicion that she delivered this song to him. Now, Tokyo told me that the song is called Ride 'em Jew Boy. He said that song Mandela played repeatedly every single night. He also played another song on that album, Sold American, but Jew Boy was his favorite. And one night in Australia recently, in Sydney, I got so high I needed a stepladder to scratch my ass. And I realized, because a law firm was in the audience, a group of people, a bunch of them, that Mandela was a lawyer and that he couldn't get him any firm because he was black. Only the Jewish law firm took him. And they were really lefties. These guys were radicals. But they loved Mandela. And they said, all you got to do, don't be a troublemaker, man. Stay out of politics. You'll be the most famous, successful lawyer in all of South Africa. That's all you have to do. Do it, Nelson. So anyway, he couldn't do that. And the reason he couldn't was like his 5-year-old daughter would hug him and say, Daddy, why are you always gone? And he said, because there's millions of little girls and boys like you all across this country, and I've got to look out for them, too. At any rate, so I think that's why he liked the song Ride 'em Jew Boy. That's other than its obvious universal appeal. His last friends and colleagues were all Jewish. So I would just say that if you're in entertainment, if you're an artist or if you're in public service, you never know who you're going to reach. When I recorded this album, my first album in 1973 in Nashville, I was asking, will the disc jockeys like this? Is there a hit on the record, you know? I never thought that this record and this song in particular would be listened to repeatedly every night, as Tokyo told me, by Nelson Mandela in his prison cell on Robben Island. So you never know who you're going to reach. Kind of keeps us all in the game. Here's a song, Ride 'em Jew Boy. Ride 'em Jew Boy. Ride 'em all around the old corral. I'm with you, boy. If I've got to ride 6 million miles. Now the smoke from camps arising. See the helpless creatures on their way. Hey, old pal, ain't it surprising how far you can go before you stay? And don't you let the morning blind you when on your sleeve you wore the yellow star. Old memories still live behind you. Can't you see by your outfit who you are? How long will you be driven relentless round the world? The blood in the rhythm of the soul. Wild ponies all. Your dreams were broken, rounded up and made to move along. The loneliness which can't be spoken just swings a rope and rides inside a song. And dead limbs play with ringless fingers, a melody which burns you deep inside. Oh, how the song becomes the singer. May peace be ever with you as you ride. How long will you be driven relentless this round the world. The blood in the rhythm of the soul. In the wind, dough candles glowing remind you that today you are a child. The road ahead, forever rolling, and anything worth crying can be smiled. So ride 'em, Jew boy, ride 'em all around the old corral. I'm with you, boy. If I've got to ride 6 million miles.
Here we go.
Just a little touch of it, how Willie Nelson went on to.
If I got to ride 6 million miles, now the smoke from camps arising, see the helpless creatures on their way. Well, old pal, ain't it surprising how far you can go before you stay? Do not let the morning blind you, when on your sleeve you wore the yellow star. Old memories still live behind you. Can't you see by your outfit who you are?
I'm Elizabeth.
Last week we covered that congressman
I'm Elizabeth
in
Warren,
New York,
and I am proud.
who Jamaal Bowman, the guy who basically rolled up his sleeves to show his big biceps and picked up a chair and was waving it and then smashed it onto the ground, and 4-letter word cursing and special cursing of AIPAC, the Jewish lobby in Washington, D.C. And well, a few days later, thank God, he got crushed by his opponent, George Latimer, also a Democrat in a Democrat primary. And he's now out. He's out. He's the guy, again, that pulled that fire alarm in Washington, D.C. to prevent the vote. Many eyes now are turning to St. Louis in the hope that another one of these anti-Semitic squad people might be clipped off. Cori Bush, she's up on August 6th. And I think AIPAC and other eyes now are turning to St. Louis for August 6th. She's been a terrible anti-Semite. She's involved in some scandals, has used campaign money to pay her husband to become a security guard for her. And he's been paid tens of thousands of dollars as a security guard with her campaign money. And it's a whole thing there. Anyway, just to refresh your memory, Jamaal Bowman now defeated, and I didn't mention it last week, but He came into the election with the full endorsement of Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts.
Proud to endorse Jamaal Bowman for Congress in New York's 16th District. He is exactly the kind of person that we need in Congress.
Enough on that.
We should all be extremely concerned about the role of big money, about the role of massive organizations that can just pour a historic amount, $20 million, the most ever spent in American history, in difficult to trace and difficult to trace funds in order to have influence in our elections. At the end of the day, I do know that House leadership, they issued their endorsement, but this is not about the president. To me, this is not about leadership. What it should be is about all of us trying to actually have a conversation about the role of AIPAC, but also the role of large money and dark money.
Understand, AIPAC's money is very transparent. And if Jamaal Bowman had not thrown that fire alarm, and even in his final big campaign speech that I showed you last week, he was ranting and raving. If you remember, he picked up that chair and he's ranting and raving. He's rolling up his sleeves to show his big muscles. He said, "We're bringing these guns to Washington." And he was just ranting, if you remember, and F this and F that. We didn't even mention and highlight for you that that whole rampage was in the South Bronx, a sliver of his district. 90% of his district was Westchester. And half the voters were Jews. And instead of appealing at the end to the 50% of his voters who were Jews up in Westchester, the way he did in his previous election, and maybe eating some crow and meeting privately with leaders of the community, and instead he chose to go into the South Bronx and put on that show. So he would have lost anyway. But they're all blaming AIPAC. Dark money. And in fact, in these elections, it's the George Soros dark money that elects district attorneys and all of them. There's an anti-Semitism, and it's important to recognize that Ocasio is part of that. It's not just some of the other members of the squad. It's part of the definition of the squad. You get in there and you become close with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and you become friends with each other. I mean, that's just what it is. If you're a Republican conservative on a whole bunch of issues, but you're not really interested in guns, that's not your thing. You're interested in low taxes or a stronger border. And then you start finding everybody else you're allied with is also big on gun. You start becoming big on the gun issue also, because that's who you're around. You're around or if you're a Democrat, liberal, and you care about the unemployed, I don't know, or people who can't make enough money to support their families. And then you find out that everybody else there, but personally, you would like a tighter border. Then you find out that all your allies are for a looser border. So eventually you take that on when you become part of a team. You watch out for each other. You join the squad, you're with Ilhan Omar, you're Rashida Tlaib, and before you know it, you're all anti-Semitic. And it's just the way it is. Well, at least we've clipped off one, and God willing, Cori Bush will be gone after August 6th. Wanted to share that with you.
In Democratic primaries, especially when
Following this week's shocking defeat of a New York Congressman, Jamaal Bowman, focus has now shifted to fellow squad member Cori Bush and her upcoming race as she faces a pro-Israel moderate of her own. She'll go up against local prosecutor Wesley Bell in August, as polls show she blew a 17-point lead while undergoing federal investigations. Joining us now is St. Louis resident and host of Stacy on the Right on Sirius XM Patriot, Stacy Washington. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, a lot has been...
Rachel.
Good morning. A lot has been said about the Bowman race, that, AIPAC got involved. They raised a lot of money against him. That's the Jewish PAC, Israel PAC. However, a lot of people in that district just said Bowman was a bad politician. He didn't do anything. He had that weird moment where he pulled the fire alarm, and lied about it. So is it that he's a bad politician, or were his progressive politics, his anti-Israel positions on the line there?
Well, I think the anti-Israel positions highlighted his ineptitude. So I don't think he was a great congressman. I don't think he represented his constituents well. He was a member of the squad, which is a distraction for congressional members. They are not supposed to be the main character. You are not supposed to go to Washington, D.C. to become famous, to enrich yourself, or to find a place where you can be a part of a group that is kind of drawing the attention away from the issues that Americans are facing. We have a high inflation, double-digit inflation right now. A lot of Americans are hurting, and that includes people in Missouri Congressional District 1, where Cori Bush is. And that lead that you talked about that she's blown, she has a lot of personal things going on, a lot of investigations into her spending, her staffers, and she's basically, she has a lot of problems. And she's similar to Jamaal Bowman in that aspect. But when you talk about AIPAC and the Jewish lobby, Jewish Democrats, these are people who had a terrible time October 7th watching Israelis under attack, the horrible rapes and murders. And then they had to then deal with anti-Semitism rising up on America's college campuses, and then finish that out with, this overall sense in the Democrat Party that they have certain constituencies in Michigan and Wisconsin that they're interested in more than the Jewish vote, which has been very, very solid for them for a very long time, decades. So
Bowman,
these people are rising up and trying to make change.
So, but Bowman had a very large Jewish constituency. So his position was obviously, at odds with a lot of his voters. Let's go to the Cori Bush race. What does her constituency look like? Are her progressive views on the line here being tested, or is it really that her corruption and the bad press that she's been getting?
Well, so it's interesting. St. Louis, Missouri has one of the largest Jewish populations outside of New York City in the United States. It's a vibrant community. Lots of Americans who live here in St. Louis are of Jewish heritage and really consider themselves to be solid Democrats. And so for her to represent Missouri Congressional District 1 and have any hint of anti-Semitism, any hint of kind of comity and feeling like she's one of the people who supports Hamas, it's not acceptable. And voters are looking for someone who'll go to Washington, D.C. and actually do something for them. And so I think Cori Bush is running up against the buzzsaw of the reality of Americans. Over 80% of Americans support Israel post October 7th. 80% of Americans actually support their prosecution of the war against Hamas because Hamas is a terrorist group. So it's the language they're using, and you couple that with her scandals, and it makes her unsuitable. She's not someone that regular Americans want representing them because her obsession appears to be with her own personal issues and views that aren't American. Anti-Semitism is not an American view.
Well, it will be interesting to see what a potential, if she loses in this, that's 2 down for the squad, how that impacts that group and their policies and the way they present themselves to the public into the future. So it has big consequences.
Thank you very much. There's quite a lot to reply to there.
While we're in this beautiful place, our hearts are in Israel. We saw clips of you rallying the nation after the worst terrorist strike on American soil. I wonder what were your thoughts when you heard that Israel was attacked by Hamas over the weekend?
My thoughts were
of course, this interview on the one hand was back in October, but as I was preparing the class and was looking at this, he spoke about things that are incredibly applicable right now, very pertinent.
that we need to support Israel. No ands, ifs, or buts. This was an unprovoked attack by terrorist people willing to kill innocent people to achieve an objective. Hamas is a political organization. They do not reflect the majority of the Palestinians.
That's the only comment he made that I disagree with. Just to make it clear, I believe that Hamas are the Arabs of Gaza, and it was proven in votes. But that's a common line. All the politicians like to say that Hamas does not recognize the so-called, quote, Palestinians. Again, they do. They were elected by the Arabs of Gaza. Every time Israel goes in to attack Hamas, Israel is attacked by civilians in Gaza as well. They evacuate and save hostages. And it turns out the hostages are being held in the homes of so-called innocent civilians. Even journalists for Al Jazeera and medical doctors are holding hostages. It's crazy.
And I And don't be surprised if Israel takes whatever action is necessary to defend herself. And it's going to be ugly for a while. But it's tough. It's tough. And I hope, I'm pretty confident the United States will stand squarely with Israel. You know, going in the neighborhoods of Gaza is going to be tough. And, you know, he's got a very seasoned military, but they just called up 300,000 reservists. Most of them probably can't fire a rifle. And to the extent they'd be put in harm's way, it's going to be awfully difficult on the prime minister. But he's got to do what he's got to do. I mean, these, you're dealing with cold-blooded killers. And you can make all kinds of excuses why they are, but they are. And his job is to protect this country. And anyway, we'll find out what he's made out of.
Among the countries on the axis of evil that you defined during your presidency was Iran. To what extent is Iran responsible for the...
I don't know. I don't get the intelligence anymore. Their stated objective is the destruction of Israel. That's what the leaders say. And in this world, you got to take what they say seriously. And Iran's been pretty good at using surrogate terrorist groups, Hezbollah being the key one, of course. And therefore, the idea of using somebody else to achieve their objective doesn't surprise me. Again, I'm kind of a hardliner on all this stuff, but I never thought we should try to accommodate Iran any way, shape, or form. I always felt the objective ought to be to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon, to prevent a cataclysmic event in the Middle East. And these are the kind of people that if you show softness, they will take advantage of it. And we'll see. The United States needs to stand squarely with the president, with Netanyahu. And the administration start off on the right foot, it seems to me. Pretty bold statement, and that's good. And he's going to take some heat. You know, both parties have got isolationist tendencies, and you know, we shouldn't get involved. You know, who cares? Well, we should. We should care. And
what does the immediate future look like for Israel in your view?
Immediate future doesn't look very bright, particularly if you're on the Hamas side. But it's going to be chaotic, and it's going to be, look, it's a democracy, and in a democracy, the people's voices matter, and there's going to be a weariness. You watch, the world's going to be, okay, let's negotiate. You know, Israel's got to negotiate. They're not going to negotiate. These people have played their cards. They want to kill as many Israelis as they can, and negotiating with killers is not an option for the elected government of Israel. And so we're just going to have to remain steadfast, but it's not going to take long. For people that's gone on too long. Surely there's a way to settle this through negotiations. Both sides are guilty. My view is one side is guilty, and it's not Israel.
Good evening. Well, historically, we have always been a great friend of Israel. Indeed, it was the Balfour Declaration in 1917 that set the blueprint for what we then saw emerge after World War II, the state of Israel. And we have been steadfast supporters of that country, as indeed have the Americans. But something significant has changed since October the 7th. And last night at the UN Security Council, we were one of the countries that voted for a ceasefire. Now, I'm pleased to say the one good thing was that it did demand the unconditional release of the hostages. But it's still surprising, given that it is stated Israeli policy that they will go after the Hamas terrorists. Surprising that we voted for that resolution in many ways. But David Cameron, Lord Cameron, as Foreign Secretary, has steadily been shifting that position. Add to that an incident that took place at Manchester Airport yesterday evening. Two brothers, Neria and Daniel Sharabi, were coming into the country.
This was a few weeks ago. It's not like it actually happened last night.
From Israel. This is just a little snippet of the confrontation they had with Border Force.
The checks we need to conduct, okay? Nobody's saying that. Nobody has said that once. So knock the attitude off. We've made the decision and you're coming in. So just let us do the checks we need to do and keep quiet. Look at me. Okay, you clear with that? Good. We're the bosses, not you, all right?
Well, fairly sharp, wasn't it? And I tell you what, I bet nobody who comes into Dover via dinghy gets spoken to like that, but it was something else that was said that was even more controversial. And Sir Michael Ellis, Conservative Member of Parliament, stood up in the House of Commons today and explained all.
Mr. Speaker, the terrorist attack of the 7th of October on Israel has provoked widespread anti-Semitism in this country and around the world, and the latest manifestation of this was at Manchester Airport yesterday, where Border Force apparently do not want Israeli Jews to enter this country. 2 innocent victims of the music festival slaughter were berated and told, and I quote, "We have to make sure that you are not going to do what you're doing in Gaza over here," end quote. This is to 2 victims of the Nova Music Festival. Blaming all Jews for the actions of their country is obviously anti-Semitic. These are people in uniform acting for this country as border force officers. It is a disgrace beyond all proportion. Their detention was clearly unlawful for several hours. They're being offered free legal representation, which I would urge them to take up. Can the Deputy Foreign Secretary confirm that Jews and Israelis are still welcome to enter this country?
Minister. Well, I thank my right honourable learned friend for his extremely robust comments, Mr. Speaker, which are reflective of an absolutely outrageous, shocking and disgraceful incident which is now being investigated.
Well, I thought Sir Michael Ellis put that pretty well, and I sense that there is a growing prejudice against Israel and the people from Israel beginning to run right through our public services. Now, Naria and Daniel Sharabi will be on with Patrick Christys tonight. He interviewed them earlier on today. You'll get the full interview this evening, but here's just a snippet.
2 hours somewhere. He called us back and he say, Naria asked him, why are you doing it? What are we doing? What are we doing wrong? For what? Because we are Jewish. And these guys say exactly like this. We want to make sure that you're not going to do what you're doing in Gaza here. It's something that bring you up everything from October 7th. That you come share your story and then you face with anti-Semitism, not from civilians, not from people that think other way than you, from the officer.
Now, I'm all for Border Force doing their job. Absolutely. I'm all for strong borders. But if what has been said there is true, then it is pretty disgraceful stuff. And I'm going to ask you a question. Have we betrayed Israel? Some will think that's far too strong a question, but you know.
Welcome back, America. We're here with our friend Lee Zeldin. Lee Zeldin, you were almost governor of New York. That's a damn shame that you weren't. And you see what's happening in New York, and it's happening all over the country. This open borders issue, this refusal to enforce student visas, the lack of vetting of individuals. We have a lot of people in this country now who hate our country, who hate us. They're in the streets openly, trashing the country, burning the American flag, replacing it with the Palestinian flag. You see the fusion of the Marxists and the universities with the Islamists. And basically Hitler Youth. They're on subways in New York. You have imams in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You have them in California. You see Dearborn, Michigan. You know, the idea was we have immigration. People come into the country. They have allegiance to the country. They assimilate into our culture rather than have 50 different cultures. The system is completely broken. Not the immigration system. The people who lack virtue and will not run the immigration system. This anti-Semitism thing, this Jew hatred thing, it's taking hold in the country, and I'm not seeing a damn thing of any real significance being done by this president or his administration. Am I missing something?
You're not missing anything, Mark, and this is by design with President Biden. From the first day that he came into office, taking executive action to open up the border, whether it was stopping construction of the border wall, it was ramping up, catch and release, getting rid of Remain in Mexico, getting rid of Title 42. When I hear President Biden and the White House talking about how they need an act of Congress in order to do their job and secure the border, we just need to look at the history of what President Trump did and what President Biden has done, proving the president has the power to open the border, the president has the power to close the border. President Biden can do it himself, taking action today, and he should. Anyone inside of our country who is engaging in terrorism, yes, it's terrorism, going way beyond free speech protections and actually blocking Jewish students from being able to get to a library, dues-paying students because they're Jewish. What we've seen in single days, where inside of states like New York this past week, we had things happening all across the state at once, people getting their home vandalized, Jewish daycare centers being denied access to taxpayer-funded resources because it was a Jewish daycare. I think anti-Semitism has exploded, but Joe Biden has done this domestic political calculation because of Rashida Tlaib and her friends in Dearborn and elsewhere, where they need to keep power, prestige, perks. They want to stay in office, so they will pander to these anti-Semites as opposed to cracking down on it. It's something that gets worse every single day. And as far as what's happening inside of these universities, it's been getting worse, building up for a while. I think anyone inside of this country who is here illegally or they're here on some visa and they're seeking harm to America, they're talking death to America, they're affiliating with Hamas and Hezbollah and other organizations, if they use October 7th as a rallying cry, and especially when they're committing additional offenses, get them the heck out of our country.
100%. Well, I'll tell you how unserious Joe Biden is. He puts out this phony, baloney executive order.
Will not get it anywhere else.
New York cops now releasing a wanted poster as it searches for a man who called on Zionists on a subway train to identify themselves. Police say the man is wanted for coercion for this chant he led while wearing a mask on a southbound 5 train at Union Square back on June 10th.
Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! This is your chance to get out! This is your chance to get out!
Can you imagine? A spokesman for Mayor Adams says the city will always protect the right to free speech, but threatening New Yorkers based on their beliefs is illegal. And he says they won't be tolerated.
All right, the New York City Police Department is searching for an anti-Israel protester who was heard threatening a subway car full of people last week. Chanley Painter joins us right now in the studio with more. Chanley?
Hey, good morning, Steve. So police are chasing down potential leads, but are asking for the public's help in identifying an anti-Israel chant leader. Pictured here on a new wanted poster released by the NYPD. They want to arrest the young man on a coercion charge, all stemming from this disturbing incident on a packed New York subway car last week. Watch.
Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! This is your chance to get out! This is your chance to get out!
On the night of this incident, anti-Israel protesters rallied in Union Square Park, holding up banners that read "Long live October 7th," and where a protester yelled that he wished Hitler was still here to wipe out the Jews. While another group swarmed a downtown Manhattan exhibit memorializing the victims of the Nova Music Festival who were slaughtered and kidnapped on October 7th. And the Post guys reporting that the authorities are also considering elevating that coercion charge to hate crimes. Ansley, I'll send it to you.
All right. Thank you, Chanley.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here.
Excuse me.
As you can see, by the way, the guy, Anas Saleh, is a Muslim, and that's who is the lead of this. Really, it's a federal crime. If he committed a crime in New York, which he obviously did, to cross state borders, he came from California, that makes it a federal crime. If you go from one state across state borders to commit a crime in another state, it raises it up to a federal crime.
Excuse me.
The other day, he had been very, very open and proud of himself. Now he doesn't want his face to be seen. mean, I look at this, I think of all the mafia movies, and even real mafia, when they get arrested, they normally look down, they put their hands on their faces. The idea that you've got 5-10 animals standing there with their obstacles to prevent the guy inside the NYPD, the New York Police Department, I would think they could be arrested for trespass.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me, Brian.
Inside the police department.
Let me go.
This is the chaos that unfolds when the police do not do their job and when their superiors send the word, don't do your job. This all could be done in 20 seconds.
Excuse me, can I just get up the stairs? Sir. Ow, sir.
And it is this kind of policing that leads to the healthcare, the chaos that, for example, this past week played itself out likewise in Los Angeles.
A man accused of yelling out anti-Semitic remarks on the subway surrendered to police today. The incident sparked outrage. Last week, cops released a new wanted poster of the man. Eyewitness News reporter Janice Yu was at the police precinct on Canal Street, where a group just tried to block reporters from leaving. Janice?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of activity as Anas Saleh walked out of the transit bureau here in the Canal Street station earlier today. Now, people there people there who were there in support of him did not want us to record anything, get anywhere close to him. We are told he will be making his first appearance in a courtroom on July 1st. In the meantime, the Manhattan DA has asked anyone with information to please contact their office.
Hurt each other. I want nobody hurt nobody.
Anas Saleh walked out of the Transit District 2 station Wednesday morning, his face completely covered, as people with umbrellas and scarves attempted to block our cameras and prevent us from walking up the steps to leave the Canal Street station.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
I'm not touching you. Saleh turned himself into the NYPD and received a desk appearance ticket for coercion 3 weeks after he was caught on video saying this.
Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! This is your chance to get out!
This incident inside the southbound number 5 train at Union Square sparked outrage, and the NYPD asked for help identifying and locating him. Saleh's job with Weill Cornell Medicine prompted this letter from the American Jewish Medical Association.
Let's get that back a moment. Turns out he was working.
With Weill Cornell Medicine prompted this letter from the American
HAMA, representing thousands of Jewish healthcare professionals and trainees across the country, and Stand With Us, an international nonpartisan education organization that supports Israel and fights anti-Semitism, together demand that the district attorney's office prosecute to the fullest extent of the law the suspects who terrorized Jewish passengers on the New York City subway system on June 10. We understand that one suspect who allegedly participated in this terror campaign has been identified as a lab technician at the Weill Cornell Medicine Relab, et cetera, et cetera. We're becoming more concerned as we see increased anti-Semitism across the country, with many suspects not being prosecuted or held accountable by authorities. This must end now. And so they call on the respective authorities, et cetera, and it's signed by the executive director, founder, president of the American Jewish Medical Association.
American Jewish Medical Association.
This is somebody who's supposed to be dedicating their lives to truth and to science. And for them to be perpetrating hate crimes is incredibly frightening. We are seeing more and more cases of anti-Semitism rising to violence, and it's completely unacceptable and frightening.
Dr. Yael Hallis, who is the president and founder of the association, says it's time for people like Saleh to face the consequences of their actions. Recently, a judge dismissed trespassing cases against the majority of those arrested for unlawfully entering Hamilton Hall during the pro-Palestinian protest at Columbia University in April. The judge cited a lack of evidence, but Hallis says it's time people are held accountable.
What we need to happen here is Alvin Bragg has to show that he is willing to prosecute hate crimes. He did not do that with Columbia.
While Cornell Medicine says it condemns anti-Semitism and that it's cooperating with the NYPD and conducting its own review.
Mayor Adams released a statement a short time ago saying that threatening New Yorkers for their beliefs is not only vile, but illegal as well. And he says that this should be a lesson to all, that the NYPD will track down criminals who make comments like this.
Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is now dropping those charges for nearly all of those pro-Palestinian protests who stormed that building. They were arrested after taking over an academic building at Columbia University back in April.
Yeah, you saw Hamilton Hall right here live. So far, at least 30 are off the hook, while the others have to appear in court next month.
Chanley Painter has.
You know, I went to Columbia. Hamilton Hall is the building they use for their freshman year classes, all the requirements, and for a great many other undergraduate classes. Other buildings are used for graduate classes, but Hamilton Hall is the central building in your first 4 years at Columbia. And for most at Columbia, that's the only years they put in. There's every reason to think that when the people get arrested at Columbia for whatever violations, there's every reason to expect that the police at the time of the arrest would forcibly take off the masks. This is not the COVID period, and the police would have authority, under the police authority, it's a legal term of art, to take off the masks. And there's absolutely no reason to be arresting people with masks as they're committing crimes and then schlepping them to the police department still wearing their masks, and then later on having them all released by a prosecutor who's willing to prosecute other people for political reasons, even if he's got very little evidence, but he's willing to drop them all because they were wearing masks, so he doesn't have proof who they were. That's absurd.
That's the story on that. Hey, Chanley.
Hey, guys. So at least 30 of the 46 cases against those campus protesters have been dismissed. It was on April 30th that Columbia students and staff members were arrested and charged with misdemeanor trespassing charges after anti-Israel protesters took over Hamilton Hall on Columbia University's campus, barricading themselves inside for hours before police with riot gear cleared the building, making dozens of arrests. The occupation was a significant escalation in the weeks-long demonstrations and encampment at the university protesting the war in Gaza. But now prosecutors claim they don't have enough evidence to support the charges or to show any property was damaged or that anyone was hurt, even noting how protesters wore masks to cover their faces and covered surveillance cameras during the incident. In a statement, the DA's office says it is continuing to pursue cases from both campuses, including all assaults against police officers. There are ongoing school disciplinary proceedings for the students who have had their case dismissed. And Columbia University declined.
It's important to remember this guy was elected with George Soros money.
For their lives.
All right. Upside down world. Take a look. Activists in New York City outraged after Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg dismissed charges against 31 anti-Israeli protesters who took over that building at Columbia University in April. Listen to this.
Bragg, bragg, punish crime, make sure criminals do their time. Bragg, bragg, punish crime, make sure criminals do their time.
Well, one of those protesters in the crowd is calling out the dangerous precedent. Jewish New York native and Harvard grad Shabbos Kestenbaum joins us live. Good to have you, Shabbos. You're furious at Alvin Bragg. Why?
You know, I find it shocking that in order to receive equity, justice, and the rule of law, we have to beg our own district attorney to prosecute crime. I am old enough to remember where just a month ago he prosecuted and broke hundreds of years of precedent to prosecute a former president of the United States, saying that no one is above the law. And then in the same breath says that 31 students who took maintenance workers hostages, who vandalized property, who intimidated, bullied, and harassed Jewish students, he's not going to prosecute them. So the double standard is shocking.
Well, he said, his office said, Shabbos, you know, there's not a lot of evidence with people screwed with the cameras, and a lot of the people didn't have criminal records, so let them walk.
Well, first of all, they arrested these students in the very room that they were trespassing in. So don't give me that
Caught
BS.
red-handed.
Caught red-handed. That's number one. And number two, if that is the case, that you're not able to identify them because of the masks, then it should be obvious to any politician or to any university that anytime there's an anti-Semitic riot or protest, you cannot wear masks. In the same vein that we did not allow mask wearing to combat the KKK, anti-democratic, anti-Western, anti-Semitic students who want to violate the law use masks to conceal their identity and escape any accountability from the law.
Sure, exactly. But you know, this is a presidential election year, and suddenly presidential politics seems to be everywhere, including in the Hamas-Israel conflict.
Yeah. I've been a registered Democrat since the day I turned 18. I don't want to abandon the Democratic Party, but they very clearly want to abandon me. And I can't understand Jewish Americans who have supported the Democratic Party historically. Why are we being treated this way? Why the double standards? Why the inaction? And it's not just New York City. We saw these anti-Semitic riots yesterday in LA. And Joe Biden, who is in charge of the Department of Justice, he can investigate these crimes. He can crack down on anti-Semitism and those who are violating the law. But there's either this inability or unwillingness to protect Jewish Americans.
And we're looking at some of the activities in LA on Sunday. It was actually a real estate event where it was like real estate in the Holy Lands, and it became a straight up hate crime. When I look at it, it's like they're obviously targeting those people because they're Jewish.
Yeah. So this is the first time in my life that I've ever seen a place of worship, of Jewish worship, being targeted specifically because these are Jews who are worshiping their religion. And let me just add, there are currently 0 Jews living in Jenin, in Nablus, in Ramallah, in the entirety of the Gaza Strip. But that does not elicit outrage. But when Jews want to legally purchase land in their ancestral homeland, all of a sudden that animates an anti-Semitic mob who feel that they have the right to intimidate, bully, harass, and to threaten and to exert physical violence on Jewish people.
Exit question for you, Shabbos. November, first Tuesday. Who are you going to vote for? You said you were a lifelong Democrat.
I've been a lifelong Democrat, but
I'm going to leave that. I like to keep that much politics out, so we'll leave that as a unanswered mystery that we'll find out. The mystery I won't leave hanging is his name is not pronounced Shabbos. Obviously, it's not Greek. The name is Shabbos, the Ashkenazic pronunciation. Very unusual to have a Hebrew name Shabbos, but anyway, there's that. One more thought comes to mind as we go forward. I have to admit a little bit about my past. When I was younger, I got arrested in demonstrations for Soviet Jewry. We never seized buildings, we never seized college buildings, maybe Russian buildings, and I got arrested a few times at Soviet Jewry. Again, never hurt anybody who wasn't representing the Russian government in the United States. We never bothered anybody else. And every time I got arrested, when you walk in a precinct, the first thing they do is they fingerprint you. And I know because if I stayed out of trouble for 6 months, I was able to get back my mugshots and fingerprints. So even if I'd been wearing a mask, the first thing that happens when they bring you in is they fingerprint you. So as far as evidence with or without a mask, they would have fingerprints. So they didn't do their job. If they wanted to do their job, easily they could have prosecuted all the people they arrested who did far more bad stuff than anything I ever did. We did sit-ins and things like that. Continuing. somebody in LA.
Close your eyes!
Abhorrent violence breaking out over the weekend in Los Angeles after a group of anti-Israel agitators blocked the entrance to a synagogue, sending...
For those of you who are not acquainted with LA, this neighborhood is known as Pico Robertson, and it's sort of the one of the two main Orthodox and generally Jewish communities in LA. There's also a community in the San Fernando Valley, which is the nearby suburb that's called Valley Village, and its old name was North Hollywood. But Pico Robertson is like 30 restaurants, every kind of restaurant, Mexican, Chinese. They even have a few that are Jewish foods, and all kinds of kosher certified restaurants and bakeries and yeshivas. My kids went to the yeshivas there in Pico Robertson. My daughters went to Yeshiva University High School for girls on Robertson, and then my son went to Yeshiva University High School for boys on Pico. And whenever Denise and I go out to eat, there's not a single kosher restaurant in Orange County, basically. So we have to drive 40 minutes to LA, and we go to Pico Robertson, and that's where we have dairy or meat, etc. It's the heart of the Jewish community, the so-called modern Orthodox Jewish community, and there's a lot of Chabad there, and there are people who are of the more Haredi black hat community. You see a lot of people with strollers and all that stuff. And Adas Torah is not a major synagogue. They could get 100 people on Shabbos and or Shabbos, and this is just outrageous. It was not a pogrom. It was basically a bunch of Muslim Arabs, 150 Muslim Arabs, most of whom are either here illegally or on student exchange, and with a certain number of Jewish kids who are born into the Reform movement. They go to Reform temples. The mothers are not Jewish, because Reform recognizes patrilineal descent. If you're a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman, they call the person Jewish because they were running out of members. Or if the woman was converted Reform, which also means she's not Jewish, and such kids cannot get bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah in a Orthodox or even a conservative place. And so they go to Reform temple till bar mitzvah. They listen to the garbage that they're taught in the Hebrew schools and by the Reform rabbis. And they grow up with a sense that Israel is open to be hated. And if they're not outright haters, that Israel is allowed to be criticized all we like. And you see in these rallies, the media constantly, as they're talking to people, they're either wearing keffiyehs, talking with clearly Arab accents, or they're telling the media, I'm Jewish too, and I'm against Israel.
Fists flying in the riot police response. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt is live in Los Angeles with the latest. Hello, Jonathan.
Good morning, Mike. They were extraordinary scenes, pitched battles being fought between pro-Palestinian protesters who targeted a synagogue and members of that synagogue and of the Jewish community that surrounds it. This all taking place in the heart of Los Angeles, in the middle of one of the city's largest Jewish communities.
Did you notice on the side, the Glatt Market? It's such a Jewish community. It actually bothers me that a good solid 1,000 or more of the thousands upon thousands did not come out with baseball bats and bicycle chains and plumbing equipment. Really, that's kind of what we should have done, because you can't count on the police. We've just seen the police are not going to protect us.
About 100 pro-Palestinian protesters descended on the area Sunday morning, and almost immediately violence broke out as those protesters tried to block the entrance to the Adas Torah synagogue. Jewish counter-protesters.
You see, that's the Ufaratz, the Jewish bookstore. Everywhere you look, and it's, as they says, there's 100 of them in a community that has tens of thousands of Jews.
Protesters tried to push them back, and for some time, violent fights broke out between the two sides.
When they're screaming globalize the Intifada, they're screaming kill Jews for being Jews. And, no, not going to let that happen.
Riot police intervened to try to keep the two groups apart and clear the pro-Palestinian protesters from the Jewish neighborhood. But tensions remained high for several hours. And at one point, at least 8 officers with weapons drawn ordered 2 pro-Palestinian protesters from their car, clearly concerned the vehicle itself.
If you look carefully at that building and the bricks on that building, that's the Lubavitchers, the Chabad. They have a thing that, like in every city, they build a Chabad synagogue in the style of 770 Eastern Parkway, where the Rabbi, when he was alive, held court. And it's like a thing, if you look online or in Wikipedia, there's like 14 synagogues around the United States that are sort of like replicas of 770 Eastern Parkway, even though they are completely incompatible with the local architectural plan. But they get permits in order to have a 770. And if you look here, it's like 770. It's an interesting side.
2 pro-Palestinian protesters from their car, clearly concerned the vehicle itself could be used as a weapon. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass condemned the protesters, saying, quote, "Today's violence in the Pico Robertson neighborhood was abhorrent, and blocking access to a place of worship is unacceptable. I want to be clear that Los Angeles will not be a harbor for anti-Semitism and violence. Those responsible for either will be found and held accountable." Now, Mike, I spoke to Rabbi Chaim Mentz of the nearby Chabad of Bel Air as the violence was playing out yesterday. He told me he found it reminiscent of the Nazi youth on the streets of Germany in the 1930s, and he said,
but honestly, I do have to add, because people get scared, I have to add, because we got to be honest. Like, I have a sister who for years would not visit because she was afraid if she comes to LA, there's going to be an earthquake. She would hear the news about earthquakes, and she would say, Dove, I just don't want to get caught in an earthquake. And I would say to her, Rhonda, darling, Rhonda, or actually Ronder, because you have to pronounce it New York style. I'd say, Rhonda, honestly, the chances of damage from an earthquake are so much less than your daily trip on the New York City subway. Most of us in LA are afraid to go to New York because of the subway. So so people hear that there's pogroms going on in Los Angeles, and in all truth, it's not a pogrom. When 100 Arabs and Jews attack a shul, that's a riot in which it's like the Crips and Bloods, where the Crips showed up and the Bloods didn't really show up. Had Jews shown up in the numbers that could have been, with baseball bats, I don't expect everybody, not over 40 years old, maybe not over, but teenagers and college kids with some baseball bats and some plumbing equipment and some bicycle chains, you don't even have a fight. I guarantee there would be no fight. The other side would see, can't start up with these people. It's like if 100 people were to descend on an Italian community in Brooklyn, in Bay Ridge, an Italian church, they would come streaming out of the pizzeria with baseball bats and black leather jackets. End of problem. If they were to attack an Irish neighborhood in Bay Ridge, they'd come running out of the bars with their baseball bats and that would be the end of it. If they came into a black, can you imagine people attacking a black neighborhood? Or in New York, a Puerto Rican neighborhood? It doesn't happen because everyone knows that locals are going to come out and they're not going to stand for it. And if Jews would do that, I do, but it definitely was not a pogrom. On the other hand, it's disgrace, and they all should be prosecuted. People should be deported, and everybody's face should be put out there the way you would embarrass people that are seeing prostitutes and they put their faces on the news. And it's just a terrible thing. And but it's not a pogrom. And you can visit LA if you're not enough. Come out and visit, and don't worry, you probably won't get caught in an earthquake either. Certainly not more than a 4.3.
Who would ever have thought we would see this on the streets of American cities? Mike?
Deeply disturbing visuals. Jonathan Hunt, thanks very much.
Sure.
For more on this, let's bring in Fox News contributor Mark Thiessen. Mark, anti-Semitic violence attacks like this one may not make headline news every single day, but they are certainly happening across America, across Europe, certainly reaching to all corners of the globe. You may have heard over the weekend synagogue goers were murdered in broad daylight in Russia. I don't know. I'm kind of out of questions on this topic, to be frank, because it doesn't seem to ever abate. It seems to be getting worse systemically since October 7th.
You're 100% right. And look, this is being presented by many in the media as a clash between two different sides of protesters. It's not a clash between protesters. A pro-Hamas mob targeted a synagogue. They didn't protest in front of the Israeli embassy. We keep hearing, they're not anti-Jew, they're anti-Israel. They didn't choose the Israeli embassy or the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles. They chose a synagogue, and they surrounded. They didn't just protest. They shouted anti-Semitic chants. They beat Jewish protesters. Imagine if this had been done to a black church in Los Angeles. If a bunch of white supremacists had surrounded a black church, started attacking black churchgoers, beating them, using pepper spray against them. Do you think it wouldn't be front page news in every newspaper in America? Do you not think the President of the United States would have issued a statement by now? But because it happens to Jews, it's okay. It just we just let it go by. Another bad day for the Jews in America.
I want to ask you about this too. New York Congressman Jamaal Bowman over the weekend, spoke out, yelled out against Israel, the Biden administration's Israel policy. He ranted and raved against AIPAC. Take a listen to some of what he said.
You're going to show AIPAC the power of the mother South Bronx. We are not going to stand silent while U.S. tax dollars kills babies and women and children. My opponent supports genocide. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
There are plenty of Jews, Mark, as you well know, here in Washington, in his district in New York, who are critical of AIPAC. But this is something else. I don't know what this is.
Well, also, can you imagine if a sitting congressman stood up on a rally and said, we're going to show the effing NAACP the power of this district? What the outrage would be? And this is the problem, is that the Democratic Party has not policed its movement and has allowed anti-Semitism to fester in the halls of Congress. It's Jamaal Bowman. It's the rest of the squad. If somebody had done what he did and targeted black people, they would be kicked off of their committees. They would be shunned by the Democratic caucus. When Representative Steve King back in 2019 said, I don't understand what's the problem with white supremacy and all the rest of it, he was kicked off of all of his committees by the Republicans in Congress. Why haven't the Democratic leadership in Congress done the same to Jamaal Bowman for this? Why haven't they done that with Ilhan Omar? Why haven't they done that with the rest of the squad? They tolerate anti-Semitism in their ranks, and then they're surprised when an anti-Semitic mob surrounds a synagogue in Los Angeles and beats Jews. There's a connection between these two things. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
All right, everybody, and I do want to take you out to this image, this video that is coming in from Smyrna, Georgia, that is just outside of Atlanta. A Gaza War protester had to be rescued, so to speak, after cementing him or herself to a car, blocking a road to a company there. The protesters calling for the company to cut ties with the Israeli military. However, officials did inform the demonstrators that they were actually targeting the wrong business and that one was not supplying money to the Israeli military. Plant Atkinson Road in Smyrna, that's where this happened, was closed down for hours upon hours as first responders used saws and jackhammers to free the person who was stuck to the vehicle. You do see it right there in the video, again coming in from our Fox 5 Atlanta team. At this point, it appears the road has reopened, and there's no word on what business these folks actually thought they were blocking, and if the protester or others will face any charges. A lot still left to figure out here, but it does appear that person has been freed and could potentially face some charges. But again, you are seeing that heavy crew presence there as they do work to remove the person cemented to that vehicle. Again, we did learn from officials that it appears they were targeting the wrong business that did not provide any funding to the Israeli military. This is one of many Gaza War protests that we've seen happening over the past nearly 9 months since Hamas did attack Israel, starting this war in Gaza that has been going on now for several months.
I don't know. Are you thinking like me? I'm thinking, leave him alone. Leave him alone. He's got the wrong place. He's demonstrating against the wrong place. Figure out a way to move his car out of the way with him and go home. Don't take 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't take like 5 firemen and firefighters and other people, and just leave him alone. Let him just stay there with the cement. He's got friends who can come and bring him food, and I don't know. But it is the definition of a schmendrick to go and get yourself into a situation like that, and then it turns out you're protesting against the wrong people. Unbelievable. Okay, we continue.
The time now 9:26 over on the East Coast and 6:26 on the West Coast.
So Brianna Gray, if you hadn't heard of her, was a presenter for The Hill, which was an online.
We covered the lady on the left last week or 2 weeks ago, a reporter who was interviewing the lady whose face right now is in the middle, who is a relative of someone who was raped on October 7th. She was interviewing, and the Israeli was describing what happened and the rape. And the lady on the left, who later on it became publicly known is viciously anti-Jewish and viciously anti-Israel, started to roll her eyes as the lady in the center was describing that Hamas was raping. As a result of the overtly hostile act by the lady on the left, rolling her eyes, she was fired by The Hill that very same day. It became a story. We covered it on our Sunday program, either last week or the week before, and this is what followed.
Show where they interview people about politics and world affairs, and she was deeply hostile to Israel, deeply anti-Israel, I would say viciously so, and engaged in all kinds of anti-Semitic tropes, in my opinion. And she was recently fired, having eye-rolled, basically, at talk of the sexual violence that Hamas committed. It was absolutely appalling, and I'll show you that clip. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because she has recently been trolled by someone pretending to be an anti-Zionist rabbi, and it made me chuckle, let's just say. But first of all, have a watch at this appalling clip of her eye-rolling at talk of Hamas sexual violence towards Israelis and Jews. Watch.
And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right, thanks for joining. Stick around, more Rising coming up next.
Yeah, and this is just the final straw, I guess, for The Hill in terms of her hostility to Israel. But have a look at this. So there's this troll account called Rabbi Linda Goldstein. It says, Chief Rabbi of Gaza, hashtag BDS, hashtag Free Palestine, I stand with Iran. And then all the rest of it. And she is obviously a troll. She's really pro-Israel. I don't know who this person is, actually. This is just a fake
Chief
account.
Rabbi of Gaza.
And she emailed Brianna and said, Dear Miss Gray, I'm horrified at the way you've been treated this past week. The Zionist machine turned their ire on you, and The Hill caved to them. Thank you for supporting and platforming anti-Zionist voices that support a just and orderly decolonization of Palestine. This anti-Zionist rabbi loves and supports you. Respect and solidarity. So Brianna replied, and she said, let's see. So no, actually, before she replied, it looks like there was another message where she said, I see you're shining the light on the IDF's Hannibal doctrine. Look up Kishka Every IDF soldier is given one as part of their kit so they can kill themselves in case they're captured. By the way, for those who don't know, kishka is a Jewish dish. But anyway, she replied, and Brianna said, "Thank you, Rabbi Goldstein. I really do appreciate your generous words of support. It means the world. Thanks again." And solidarity, Brianna. And as you can see, this was in response to this Hannibal Doctrine message, which just shows how
Israel, as we know, took every step to undermine UNRWA, the UN agency, with a lot of allegations about UNRWA staff being members of Hamas, effectively blocked Hamas UNRWA operations in the north of Gaza. The World Central Kitchen withdrew after the attacks on its convoy. So the distribution of the aid that is piling up outside Gaza is itself extremely difficult. No doubt the situation within Gaza to distribute aid is very difficult. So, I mean, I think the evidence shows that Israel's allies have been increasingly frustrated that Israel has not been expediting aid at a point when there is famine, risk of famine in Gaza, risk of disease, lack of water and essential supplies and medical facilities. Otherwise, why would the US and UK and other Western leaders have been speaking in the way that they have been?
Forgive me, Mr. McDonald, you asked specifically about evidence, and I would like to refer to the evidence that I had begun addressing earlier, namely the 449,230 tonnes of aid. It was asked how this compared with previous lorries of humanitarian assistance entering Gaza. It far outstrips the previous. It is also over 3 times the humanitarian provision that the World Food Programme estimates is required to feed the entire population of Gaza. And therefore we must ask ourselves, what is the impediment? Clearly, the 650 lorries that are waiting to be distributed factor into that, but it is also significant that the Fatah authorities have over the last few days been clear that Hamas in Gaza is hijacking aid, is depriving civilians of that aid, is stockpiling it, and is selling excess aid off in the black market at inflated prices. It has also been accused of killing aid workers in an attempt to generate a humanitarian crisis. Why would it do so, you may ask? Because it is plain that Hamas's only aim in the current circumstances is to survive and to drive up international pressure, as it has been doing, and the comments referred to are indicative of that, on Israel to cease its operation in Gaza. That, of course, would enable Hamas to survive and to continue not only to suppress and oppress the Palestinian civilians in Gaza, but also to fire rockets onto the Israeli civilian communities in Israel. That firing continued only yesterday. So that is an important aspect of the evidence that we have, the volume of aid going in and the real reasons as to why there may still be shortages in Gaza. But the references to some of the requirements, legal requirements on aid, are also important to be clear on. It was suggested to you that humanitarian relief is required without limit. That is not correct. Article 23 of the 4th Geneva Convention is very clear that the requirement to facilitate aid into Gaza is caveated so that it is not diverted to enemy forces. In fact, the requirement doesn't apply where aid cannot be successfully provided without diversion. Nonetheless, as in previous conflicts, Israel is going far above the actual requirements on it. The reasons I would stress that the casualty figure inaccuracies are significant is that it is on this basis that these conclusions of indiscriminate attacks or disproportionality are being drawn. Now, not only, I'm afraid, is that legally illiterate in terms of the proportionality principle in international law, which is not about comparing casualty figures. It is very clearly about weighing the anticipated direct concrete military advantage of a strike against the anticipated collateral damage. It is an intention-based analysis. It is not an effects-based analysis. But all of these misrepresentations of international law are essentially feeding the mispremise upon which these conclusions are being drawn. Likewise, reference to famine that has been made. As of last night, there were 650 lorries of humanitarian aid post-inspection by Israel that were awaiting distribution on the border inside Gaza. Since the start of this war in October, there have been 24,018 lorries of humanitarian assistance delivered. That equates to 449,230 tons. Just on the casualties point, at least 5 statistical analyses have been carried out by statisticians, data scientists, biomathematicians and economists, including from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, the Royal Melbourne Institute of Tech, Washington Institute for Near East Policy, that say that the figures, which include those put before the court, do not add up and are likely fabricated or manipulated. And then, as I was indicating, since the 10th of April, even Hamas has acknowledged that 1/3 are unsubstantiated by identifying information. I was also indicating that, and it's important that the committee members are alive to this, no distinction is made by this internationally prescribed terrorist organisation between civilians and combatants, and no identification of the manner in which the casualties alleged have come to die. We know that Hamas is bombing its own civilians. We know they've been shooting their own civilians. We know that rockets fired from Gaza towards Israel are also falling short in the Gaza Strip.
בוקר טוב, שבוע טוב לכולם. היום יום ראשון, י"ז בסיוון תשפ"ד, 23 ביוני 2024. אני מתכבד לפתוח את ישיבתה השבועית של הממשלה כאן בירושלים בירתנו הנצחית. אדוני ראש הממשלה.
Every Sunday, the Israeli cabinet meets, and at the beginning of each cabinet weekly session, the prime minister makes a very brief statement. And this is the statement last Sunday.
תודה. אנחנו מחויבים להשיב את תושבי הדרום והצפון בבטחה לבתיהם.
We are obligated to return those who reside in the southern part of Israel, near Gaza, the northern part of Israel, near the Lebanon border. We have to bring people back to their homes.
אנחנו מחויבים לבנות את היישובים, לשקם את הקהילות, להזניק את הצפון והדרום קדימה בכל התחומים.
We have to rebuild and resettle those communities and restore them to what they were.
לשם כך החלטתי למנות את האלוף במילואים יפתח רון-טל לתפקיד ראש מנהלת תקומה בדרום, ואת האלוף במילואים אליעזר מרום צ'ייני לראש מנהלת הצפון.
Therefore, I have named 2 particular military guys, one to lead the reconstruction in the south and the other to reconstruct in the north.
אני בטוח ששניהם יעשו עבודה מצוינת, וגם בטוח שכל שרות ושרי הממשלה ייתנו להם גב מלא בעבודתם החשובה.
So I'm very hopeful that all the members of this cabinet will give them their full backing.
אני מעריך מאוד את התמיכה של הנשיא ביידן והממשל האמריקני בישראל.
I very much appreciate the things that President Biden and the American government have done for Israel since October 7.
מאז תחילת המלחמה, ארצות הברית נתנה לנו תמיכה חשובה מאוד ברוח ובחומר, באמצעי ההגנה ובאמצעי ההתקפה.
The American government, since the war began, has been giving us backing, both in spirit and in substance, with helping us with our defense and with our offense.
אבל לפני כ4 חודשים,
However, since 4 months ago,
חלה ירידה דרמטית באספקת החימושים שהגיעו מארצות הברית לישראל.
A dramatic drop in the amount of arms supply from America has begun.
במשך שבועות ארוכים פנינו לידידינו האמריקנים בבקשה להאיץ את המשלוחים.
Over the course of many weeks, we have turned to our American friends, please to speed up the deliveries.
עשינו זאת פעם אחר פעם.
We did that time after time.
בדרגים הגבוהים ובכל הדרגים.
We've gone to the highest most levels, the uppermost levels in the government, and to all the different levels.
ואני רוצה להדגיש, עשינו זאת בחדרי חדרים.
And I want to emphasize, we did all of this behind closed doors.
קיבלנו כל מיני הסברים, אבל דבר אחד לא קיבלנו.
We received all kinds of explanations as to why we have not been getting at the same pace these last 4 months. But there's only one thing we haven't gotten.
המצב הבסיסי לא השתנה.
The one thing we haven't gotten is the reality hasn't changed.
פריטים מסוימים הגיעו בטפטוף, אבל המסה הגדולה של החימושים נשארה מאחור.
We have been getting some stuff, in drips and drabs, but the major deliveries continue to be delayed.
לאחר חודשים של היעדר שינוי במצב זה, החלטתי לתת לכך ביטוי פומבי.
And therefore, after many months of this delay and behind the closed doors and nothing's happening, I finally decided to make a public statement.
עשיתי זאת מתוך ניסיון של שנים וידיעה שצעד זה חיוני לחדץ את הפקק.
I did this based on many years of my own political experience and had determined that this will be a positive thing. It's got to be done, to go public.
צפיתי שזה יהיה כרוך בהתקפות אישיות נגדי מבית ומבחוץ.
I knew that I'm going to come under attack from President Biden and from other politicians for publicly displaying that we're upset that we're not getting those weapons.
כפי שקרה כשיצאתי נגד הסכם הגרעין עם איראן, כפי שקרה וקורה.
Look, it's the same thing that I came under personal attack when I publicly came out against Obama's Iranian nuclear deal. And that's the way it goes.
שאני מתנגד פעם אחר פעם להקמת מדינת טרור פלסטינית, וכפי שקורה עכשיו, כשאני מתנגד לסיום המלחמה, תוך השארת החמאס על כנו.
That's the way it's happening now when I come out against a so-called Palestinian country. I come under personal attack, and everything going on now in the war against Hamas, I come under personal attack. So I was prepared to go public about how we're not getting the weapons, even though I knew I'd come under personal attack.
אבל אני מוכן לספוג התקפות אישיות למען ביטחון ישראל.
But I'm prepared to absorb personal attacks on behalf of the security of Israel.
כראש ממשלת ישראל, תפקידי הוא לעשות הכל כדי להבטיח שללוחמים הגיבורים שלנו יהיה מיטב אמצעי הלחימה.
As Prime Minister of Israel, it devolves on me to assure that our heroic soldiers receive the best possible supplies.
לאור מה ששמעתי ביממה האחרונה, אני מקווה ומאמין שהנושא הזה יגיע לפתרון בזמן הקרוב.
And the feedback I'm getting since I went public has been that it looks like we're now on the way to getting a solution to this problem very shortly.
אבל אני מבקש להדגיש, ואמרתי זאת גם לידידינו האמריקנים, אמצעי אחד יש לנו, והוא תמיד יכריע את הכף. הגבורה והנחישות של הלוחמים שלנו, ועם הנשק הזה אנחנו ננצח.
But we have a very important supply or military supply already, namely our courageous fighters. And with this extra supply of weapons, together we will succeed. As a refresher, Israel has 3 TV stations, plus a 4th. They have Channel 11, which is like PBS. It's the government public broadcaster. Then there's Channel 12 and Channel 13, the 2 independent stations that lean left, like CBS, NBC, ABC, PBS, CNN, MSNBC. And then they have Channel 14 that leans right, like Fox. So this is Channel 13, one of those independent stations, and they're doing and this is the last main thing for today. There might be one other small thing. This is the last main thing. One of the reporters who had been in Gaza 20 years ago when Israel was fighting a previous war returned to Gaza just recently, past week, to see how things have changed between 20 years ago and June 19th, which was like a week ago. And remember, the Philadelphia corridor is the border with Egypt. And it's across that border that Hamas has been smuggling weapons for 20 years, 30 years, 20 years, 20 years. They've been smuggling weapons and people through Egypt, underground tunnels, underneath the Philadelphia corridor into southern Gaza in the Rafah or Rafah area. And then it filters its way up north to Khan Yunis and then to the center, then Gaza City, etc., etc.
פילדלפיה אחרי 20 שנה. בעבר גם כשישראל שלטה כאן, הנסיעה לאורך הגבול שבין עזה למצרים הייתה רק ברכב משוריין. היום, 6 שבועות אחרי שצה"ל החל לפעול ברפיח, אנחנו חוצים את הציר בהאמר פתוח. את רוב הנסיעה בציר פילדלפיה אנחנו עושים רכב פתוח לא ממוגן, שזה אולי מצביע על רמת הביטחון שצה"ל מרגיש לנוע על הציר הזה, אחרי שהוא פתח פה מסדרון די רחב, השמיד חלק ניכר מהשטח הבנוי שסמוך לכביש.
Well, as we've been saying very often, that is our class, it's been necessary to bomb those buildings and create those safe zones so that the army can drive in a safe environment, even unprotected by armor, compared to 20 years ago, where everything, any travel had to be under heavy armor. This is part of why they've done it, because otherwise snipers shoot and can kill, God forbid, so many more. And that's why that's going on.
שמאפשר תנועה יחסית בחופשיות ובביטחון. את הקטע האחרון של הדרך מהגבעה שעליה עמד פעם מוצב גירית של צה"ל, אנחנו עושים כבר בנמר ממוגן. 25 דקות נסיעה מכרם שלום, ואנחנו בים. מגיעים לנקודה שבה התמקם מפקד חטיבה 401. מצב. בני אהרון והחטיבה שלו היו הראשונים להיכנס לעזה לפני 8 חודשים, ועברו את הרצועה מהקצה הצפוני שלה ועד לפינה הדרומית ביותר. העבדות הקשות שספגו בסוף השבוע העלו סימני שאלה על נחיצות הפעולה כאן, וחשוב לו ולצה"ל להסביר למה זה חשוב.
כמה חשוב המקום הזה? למה הוא חשוב כל כך? א', זה אפשר לנו לייצר שליטה על כל פילדלפי, זה בעצם הנקודה האחרונה. מכאן ועד כרם שלום צה"ל שולט עם מוקדה 162 על כל המרחב, 401 פה היא ראשונה על החוף, ואז יתר החטיבות. זה נותן לנו שליטה אחת על כל המרחב של ההברחות מעל הקרקע, זה נותן לנו אפשרות ושליטה מבצעית להתחיל לטפל במנהרות שהולכות לכיוון מצרים, זה נותן לנו אפשרות לבצע פה שליטה על הברחות מהים. אפשר לראות פה דרך אגב גם את הספינות של צה"ל וגם ספינה מצרית שנמצאת פה, וזה נותן לנו פה שליטה כי החמאס היה לבצע מפה הברחות ימיות גם של אנשים וגם של אמל"ח. זה שאנחנו נמצאים פה מאפשר את הדבר הזה.
העניינים. הופלה. הסתדרת בחיים. את המפקדה שלו מכם בבית נאה שנותר שלם וצופה על הים ועל העיר. הם רק שבוע כאן, אבל כבר התארגנו יפה. אחלה ייצור הרפורמט. מה? שבוע קשוח, אה?
אם על הים עד עד...
וואי. מה אתם אומרים?
אתה מרגיש בבית.
שאלה. האמת? אם מלחמה אז ככה? הסתדרתם?
סגנים, זה. יש לו גם מקררים שלו.
גם בית מושקע. עשו יפה. כשהחלה הפעולה ברפיח, היו כאן למעלה מ1,000,000 בני אדם, רובם פליטים. היום כמעט ולא נשארו כאן אזרחים.
Remember 2 weeks ago that 3 weeks ago Kamala Harris saying that she looked at all the maps and there's no possible way that Israel can move 1,000,000 people out of the Rafiah or Rafah area because she looked at all the maps. They're all gone now.
זה ממש לא כמו שתיארו לנו. אנחנו כמעט לא מצאנו אוכלוסייה במרחבים שהגענו לתקוף אותם, כמעט ולא. היום אם אני עכשיו, אתה מסתכל על החוף, אתה לא תראה אנשים, אין אנשים. אם אני ארים משקפת, אולי אתה תראה בודדים. צריך להגיד שכל פעם שהתקדמנו, זה חלק מהעניין של למה לא התקדמנו בבת אחת על הכל, מדורג, כדי גם לאפשר לאוכלוסייה להתפנות, ולאפשר לנו את היתרון של חופש פעולה בהפעלת הכוח.
In other words, Israel did not even have to move out 1,000,000 people. They just left. They saw it was becoming a battlefield of Israel to try to clear out the last 2 battalions of Hamas. And so people got out. And since they did not have access to Kamala Harris's maps, they found plenty of places to go.
למרות המחיר המאוד כואב ששילם צה"ל בלחימה כאן 22 לוחמים, בסך הכל ההתקדמות ברפיח הרבה יותר מהירה ממה שציפו, בעיקר בגלל ההתפנות המוחלטת של האוכלוסייה. העיר התרוקנה מאזרחים, ברור לצבא שכל מי שנמצא ומסתובב באזורים האלה הוא מחבל חמאס ואפשר לפגוע בו. זה מאוד מזרז ומקל על הלחימה, אבל יש לנו עוד כמה שבועות של לחימה כאן ברפיח לפני שתושג הכרעה על כלל החטיבה של חמאס.
ייקח לנו עוד כמה שבועות כדי שנוכל להגיד הכרענו אותה. בהקשר הזה כשאני אומר הכרעה זה אומר להשמיד יכולות, להשמיד מחבלים, לטפל גם בעל קרקע וגם בתת קרקע, וככל שיהיה יותר זמן נספיק יותר.
אתה יודע שבמקומות שבהם תימנת בצפון הרצועה כבר יש לך משהו.
כן, ברור לי שזה מרדף אינסופי. אני חושב שאנחנו יותר מהירים מהאויב, כן, ביכולות שלו.
לרוב הלוחמים כאן זה מרגיש אינסופי. הם כבר לחמו בשאטי ובג'באליה, ברימל ובתופח, והעייפות ניכרת. כמה זמן כבר במילואים?
בסבב הזה כמעט 60 יום, בסבב קודם 128 יום, כמעט 180 יום רק השנה.
ואיך הבית עומד בזה?
הבית מתקשר, אך בואו נבוא למקום קצת יותר בטוח ברשותכם.
מה שמך?
יורם.
יורם.
אתה במקרה מראה את זקן השבט.
זקן השבט. בן כמה זקן השבט?
זקן השבט היא 2.5 נכדים.
די!
כן.
מה אתה עושה פה, סבא? אתה מוקף פה באנשים שהם בגיל של הילדים שלך.
פחות או יותר, כן, אפשר בהחלט לומר את זה.
מה מצבם?
אני יכול לומר לך שקודם כל, ה-added value שלנו, המבוגרים הזקנים, אנחנו אולי בכושר קצת פחות, והגב קצת יותר כואב, והכתפיים גם, אבל הרוח איתנה, וזה added value שאנחנו נותנים להם. אנחנו בהחלט כוח שמחזק.
הם לא עייפים?
הם עייפים כמו שכולם עייפים, אבל רוחם איתנה, והם מבינים היטב את המשימה, ויודעים בדיוק מה אנחנו עושים פה. הפוך, כשמגיעים הביתה, פותחים חדשות, אז אתה כבר לא מבין מה קורה. רק כשאנחנו מגיעים לפה, אנחנו יודעים בדיוק מה אנחנו עושים כאן.
מה אתה רואה חדשות שאתה לא מבין?
מעדיף לא לראות. מעדיף לא לראות, כי באמת, אם כבר אנחנו מדברים על הדבר הזה, אז יש שם דברים שמחלישים את העם, ויש שם אמירות לא טובות. וכשאנחנו מגיעים לפה, כל זה נעלם. אנחנו פה משני צידי המתרס, הפוליטי, גם ככה, זה בכלל לא מעניין, זה שיח שבכלל לא עולה. אנחנו כאן כולנו אחים לנשק, במובן הכי פשוט וטהור ומדויק של המילה. וזאת הרוח היחידה שצומחת כאן.
יותר גדול מלחייב, שאתה מסתכל על התמונה הגדולה כמו שחרור החטופים, זה נותן לך בוסט.
נכנסת, כמה חטופים היו כאן ברפיח?
אני לא יודע להגיד מספר, אני יודע להגיד שלנו כמות מסוימת שאמרו שיכול להיות שנמצאים ברפיח.
כולם עברו?
אני לא יודע להגיד את זה.
יש עדיין חטופים ברפיח?
יש בחלק מהמקומות מידע בסיסי על זה שיש חטופים ברפיח. בין האורגנים שלי יש, זה להתחשב בכך שיש מצב שיש פה חטופים ברפיח.
זו בעצם נקודת המפגש בין רצועת עזה, מצרים, שנמצאת כאן ממש מאחוריי, והים, בעצם ציר ההברחות המרכזי של חמאס ממצרים לתוך הרצועה. אלה כבר שרידים של כפר הדייגים השוודי, כפר השוודי הוא כונה, ששוכן בפינה הזאת, כפר לא גדול. ואם מסתכלים על קו החוף, אנחנו בעצם רואים כבר את אזור המואסי. לשם נמלטו רוב האזרחים שהיו ברפיח. סביר להניח שאיתם גם הגיעו גם אנשי חמאס וגם חטופים, וממש ממש בקצה יש שם ראות לא רעה, אפשר כבר לראות את העיר עזה. כלומר, אנחנו רואים את החוף בעצם של כל הרצועה. בצה"ל אומרים ששליטה במקום הזה היא קריטית להצלחת המשך הלחימה. שלא כמו במקומות אחרים, כאן הקרב הוא עדיין מול אויב סדור, גדודי חמאס שמתפקדים, שהתכוננו ללחימה עם המון מלכודים, מצלמות אבטחה בכל פינה, ורשת אינסופית של מנהרות, ענפה ומפותחת יותר מבכל מקום אחר בעזה.
אנחנו רואים קרב, מגדירים אותו. לא בטוח שהם מתכוונים לזה, אבל ככה זה נראה. למה אני מתכוון? הם מה שהם עושים, אנחנו מתקדמים לתא שטח מסוים, אוקיי, אנחנו שוהים בו. הם יוצאים מהפירים, מתקילים, נכנסים לתת קרקע, ממלכדים את הפיר, וסוגים לקו הבא.
היכולת שלנו להגיע לאותם קצה חוץ, שבין אם זה פיר ובין אם זה צבעים שאנחנו קודחים אותם ונופלים על הצבעים עצמם, להכניס לשם לחימה, בין אם זה לוחמים, בין אם זה חומרי נפץ. אנחנו, למרות שזאת המערכת הכי מורכבת של התת קרקע שנתקלנו בה, יש לנו כאן הכי הרבה הצלחות. הרגנו פה הרבה מאוד מחבלים.
אנחנו יוצאים לראות מקרוב כמה מהמנהרות שכבר נחשפו, יחד עם רב סרן א' מיחידת יעלו. א', אני מבין שאת מומחית המנהרות פה. כמה זמן את כבר פה ברפיח?
אני מעל חודש.
על חודש? ואיך זה להיות פה בתוך החבורה הזאת?
מרגישה בבית.
דואגים לך?
כן.
לראות את התנאים?
כן, מרגישה בבית.
אז מה אנחנו הולכים לראות עכשיו בעצם?
עכשיו אנחנו נרד לאורך גבול פילדלפי, נראה לכם נקודה אחת שבה עשינו חקר ומצאנו אחת מהמנהרות שנמצאת על גבול פילדלפי. אנחנו מבינים שהפנים שלהם לכיוון מצרים.
אוקיי, איפה אנחנו נמצאים עכשיו? רואים פה את הגבול עם מצרים, 4 מטרים מאיתנו. מצד שמאל, גבעת גירית, זה שטח שולט ששולט על כל רפיח, שכונת שבוע ופאתי תל אל סולטן. ומה שאפשר לראות כאן זה בדיוק מה שדיברנו עליו. למה בעצם הגענו לרפיח? למה היה צריך לכבוש את השטח הזה של פילדלפי? בדיוק בגלל הדברים האלה. דוגמה אחת מבין מאות. יש פה תוואי שרואים שיורד 20 מטר למטה. שימו לב לתוואי שיש בו תמיד כל כמה מטרים סוג של מדרגה שעוזרת להניח ציוד למי שרוצה להבריח דברים וכן הלאה. והתוואי הזה הולך לכיוון, כשמגיעים אליו למטה, הולך צד אחד לכיוון עומק עזה, והצד השני הולך לכיוון מצרים.
הפלסטינים מכנים את רפיח אום אל נפק, אם המנהרות. כי כאן בציר פילדלפי בעצם הומצאו המנהרות הראשונות. בהתחלה זה היו מנהרות פרימיטיביות שרק שימשו להברחה בין מצרים לרצועת עזה כשישראל עוד שלטה בעזה. והיום מה שמוצאים פה זה מפלצת עם פירים כאלה כל 10 מטרים. זה הכל פירים, בני?
רואה את התוואי? אתה רואה איך התוואי שהתחלנו משם?
זה בעצם בורות שיגור, אבל לא?
זה חלק מהתוואי שעובר, חלקו מתחבר לבורות שיגור שראיתם פה, אומנם דרסנו את זה, אבל היה פה ממש משגירים גדולים. ותראו את ההמשך של זה, איך זה הולך, נוצא את הכל.
זאת אומרת, אתה אומר, אנחנו הולכים פה על אוויר.
כן, אתה ממש הולך פה, כל המרחב פה, מתחת לעזה, וזה נראה לי כבר, הצופים שלך כבר למדו את זה, שאין מקום מעל הקרקע, שאין מתחתיו משהו מתחת לקרקע. מה שמיוחד פה ברפיח, שזה ייחודי אצלהם, זה שכל המנהרות מחוברות ביחד. בדרך כלל יש ייעוד למנהרות לבחירים, ומנהרות ללוחמים, ומנהרות להתעצמות, ומנהרות חוצות לישראל כדי לעשות פיגום בישראל. כאן זה מערכת אחת עם כמה יהודים ביחד שנדאגו לחבר. לדוגמה, להם היה מאוד מאוד חשוב שגם אם יש מנהרה של מישהו שהוא לא מהחמאס, הוא יצטרך לעבור דרך מנהרה של החמאס ולשים שם מס.
זאת אומרת, אם אני נכנס פה, הולך, איפה אני אצא?
אתה תצא, יש לך פה מרחבים שאנחנו יודעים להגיד, שנמצאים בעומק רפיח, ובטוח יש גם חיבור מפה לח'אן יונס, ויש פה דברים, יש פה עיר שלמה מתחת לקרקע.
כשנכנסו הכוחות לציר פילדלפי, הם מצאו עשרות רקטות מוכנות בתוך בורות שיגור כאלה ומכוונות ליישובים בישראל, מהעוטף ועד מרכז הארץ. כל המרחב הזה של ציר פילדלפי זה הגבול עם מצרים, מלא בבורות שיגור כאלה שטוענים אותן ברקטות ויורים מכאן לכיוון שטח ישראל, אבל עכשיו בעצם, כשצה"ל אוחז בגבול עצמו ופוגע ביכולות הייצור של חמאס בתוך רצועת עזה, לחמאס קשה מאוד להתחמש מחדש, קשה לו למלא מחדש את המלאים, יש להם עדיין רקטות, אבל החבית הזאת יש תחתית.
וצריך גם תמיד גם להשמיד את גם אתרי הייצור, כדי שבאמת לא יהיה יכולת להתחדש, אחרת זה לא... זה מערכת אחת שלמה, של ייצור והטמנה והפעלה ופעילים, צריך לטפל בכל המרכיבים של המערכת.
ההורים יודעים שאת ברפיח?
ניסיתי להסתיר עד שכבר הבינו שאני לא זמינה, אז הם יודעים.
ויודעים ממש מה יקרה עכשיו שהם יראו את זה?
הם לא היו מופתעים, הם כבר מתחילת הלחימה הבינו שאני, בוא נגיד, בפנים.
אמא מצליחה לישון?
כנראה שלא, אבל הם מתמודדים יפה, הם מסתירים ממני כנראה.
תגידי משהו שירגיע אותך.
אוהבת אתכם מאוד, שמחה שאתם מאחוריי. ותכלס, פה אני צריכה להיות, אז נראה לי שגם הם שמחים איתי.
קשה היה שלא להיזכר בפעם האחרונה שהייתי כאן בציר פילדלפי לפני 20 שנה. אז צילמתי את התמונות הקשות האלה.
סורקים מטר עד מטר, כל מטר שעובר עד הסוף.
מה בעצם אתם מנסים לחפש?
בוא נגיד איברים של החברים שלנו.
לוחמי גבעתי מחפשים אחרי שרידי 5 חבריהם שנספו מפגיעת RPG בנגמש הנדסה. החיילים כאן במוצב ראו את הפיצוץ העצום מבעד לחרכי הירי, ממש מתחתם. 20 שנה אחרי, בשבת האחרונה, שוב נגמש הנדסה, שוב פגיעת RPG, ושוב אבדות קשות של 8 לוחמים.
אירוע קשה מאוד. זה לאבד אנשים בבת אחת בשנייה אחת. אבל תשמע, 401 זה חטיבה שנכנסה ראשונה אז בזיקים והגיעה ראשונה לים. יש פה מפקדים מדהימים ולוחמים יוצאים מן הכלל. הם אוספים אחד את השני ועולים למעלה. אני מקבל את האנרגיה מהם. ואני אומר לך שהרוח שעם ישראל נותן לנו היא הכי חשובה לנו. אנחנו מרגישים את עם ישראל כל הזמן. כשאנחנו מרגישים אותו איתנו, יש לנו תנופה להמשך קדימה.
ואיך זה מרגיש עכשיו?
אנחנו מרגישים שהם תמיד איתנו. אתה יודע מה, אני אתן לך דוגמה. קיבלתי כביסה בוקר, ויש בפנים סוכריה קטנה ועד הניצחון, אז תשמע, זה מי ששם את הסוכריה בכביסה שלי, היא נראה לי לא יודעת את זה, אבל זה נתן לי להתחיל את הבוקר בתחושה ממש טובה, זה נותן לנו המון, תדעו את זה, תדעו. אנחנו פה בשביל עם ישראל, ושהם איתנו, אנחנו מרגישים את זה, נותן לנו תנופה. אנחנו נמשיך עד הסוף בשבילם.
אחרי, רק תחזרו כולכם טוב.
כן.
איזה בוקר, כמה ארץ ישראל יפה.
אנחנו כאן שומרים עליכם, אוהבים אתכם.
מי שברך אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה לישראל, הוא יברך את חיילינו העוברים בים, באוויר וביבשה, ישמור אותם ויחזירם בריאים ושלמים לביתם. וידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ובעטרת ניצחון, ויקוים בהם הכתוב, כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם, להושיע אתכם, ונאמר אמן.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. Put together a program that I thought would be very important, and thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Tuesday night we do Navi, Thursday night we do Rambam, and be well. Thanks. I'm sorry if we went a little bit over today, longer than usual. I didn't expect, I thought it was a little bit shorter. I may have talked too long in the beginning about Kinky Friedman. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.